Hi, students. So I want to start by giving you a very brief overview of the history of research that leads to this class. And I think you should probably take notes because I'm going to go over a couple key terms that will be central to a lot of our reading. And these key terms are WAC and WID. WAC stands for Writing Across the Curriculum, and this is the first movement that occurred starting in the late 1960s, really kind of took off in the 1970s. And this was the idea, especially in college, though also in the high school and other K through 12 arenas. It is the idea that writing should be taught everywhere. Prior to this, writing, if it was taught at all, was just located to specific writing classes, part of the English department. And so the WAC movement was the idea that faculty all across the university would be teaching writing. This was also very much associated and part and parcel of a move away from lecture-based learning, where the teacher, sometimes called the banking model of education, where the teacher just imparts knowledge, deposits it in the student, and there it sits and reaps interest, or at least just sits. As opposed to this banking model of knowledge, there were movements that the way students learn is more active by engaging with content, by having opportunities to independently discover things, to make meaning and understand things for themselves. So the Writing Across the Curriculum movement is really part of this switch from lecture-based to more active learning by doing modes of education. Writing was a key part of it. So it was a good movement overall, but it also had some problematic assumptions. First of all, there was an assumption, and this is an assumption that I had when I first started teaching, that more writing is good, and that by simply assigning writing, students will learn how to write better. There's no evidence to suggest that. There's no relationship between quantity of writing and students writing better. Instead, that relationship has to do with the quality of writing that's assigned and how it is evaluated and how the instructor teaches the art of writing. So the flawed model of just assigning writing, assign it and they will come, assign writing and students will learn to write, was eventually replaced in the late 80s, really starting in the early 90s, with this idea that we need to teach students how to write in their majors. God damn it! Hi, students. So I want to begin by giving you a very brief overview of the key educational movements that inform this class and kind of the history of research that led to what we will be discussing about in this class. And you might want to take notes because I'm going to go over a few key terms that will keep coming up again in our readings. And these key terms are WAC, which stands for Writing Across the Curriculum, and WID, which stands for Writing in the Disciplines. These are two intersecting movements within educational curriculum development, particularly at the higher education level, but they've also come to inform education at the high school and even the middle school and elementary school levels. So the first movement, Writing Across the Curriculum, or WAC, started in the 70s, and that's when it really took off in this country. And it was an idea that writing would not just be taught in single courses as it had been before, and it would not just be focused on correctness and getting students to write a perfect paragraph and a perfect sentence and eliminating all grammatical errors. Instead of that very skills-based correctness approach, it would be more integrated into learning and learning across classes, across the entire curriculum. The writing across the curriculum movement also was part of a shift in education from a lecture-based model of teaching and instruction to more active modes of learning. So instead of a lecture-based model, which is sometimes called a banking model, where the idea is that the teacher deposits information in the heads of students, where it either, it sits and grows and multiplies over time, or at least just stays there. And so there's this transmission from teacher to student. In place of that banking model of education, of learning, of teaching, we get more of an active and student-based, learner-based model of education, where students learn by doing things, by engaging with course content in meaningful ways, in ways that really invite them and challenge them to do something with the material that they're learning. And writing is a key part of that movement from lecture-based banking transmission models of teaching to more active models of teaching. And so in the writing across the curriculum model, teachers in all disciplines, all across the university, every department would be responsible for teaching their students to write. Now, this movement, however, was flawed by some what in retrospect turned out to be naive assumptions. And probably the biggest naive assumption was this idea that more writing is good, or that students will learn to write just because they're assigned writing. And all of our research suggests that there's virtually no relationship between quantity alone of writing assigned and students' improvement in their writing abilities. So the relationship between quantity of writing assigned and quality of students' writing is basically non-existent. Instead of quantity of writing, it really matters that how the instructor teaches it, that the instructor gives feedback, that there's opportunities for peer review and multiple drafting, and that students are given a good assignment that's really kind of encouraging them to make meaning within a discipline and meaning within a particular type of content area. So while the writing across the curriculum movement had many good things about it, it was flawed by a very naive, uninformed view of what it meant to teach writing. So in the 90s, early 90s, this began to be replaced by the writing in the disciplines movement. And this movement is informed by the idea that we have to teach students how to write in different contexts, that different disciplines, different discourse communities, different areas have different modes of writing and different modes of thinking, and that writing and thinking go together, that how one writes effectively in a particular discipline is really intertwined with how one thinks in that discipline. How one innovates in that particular discipline. And so the writing in the disciplines movement is informed by the notion that students really need to be taught how to learn, how to write in their majors. And that the writing instruction needs to be much more focused, much more informed. It needs to be good feedback and informed by good assignments. So today, both of these movements still exist. They're parallel and they're often abbreviated as WAC/WID. And we think about these two in terms of writing to learn versus learning to write. So when we think about WAC, writing across the curriculum, and writing to learn, we think of assignments where the goal is not to teach the student how to write, but to engage in writing as a way of interacting with content more deeply. So, for instance, if I asked you to do a reading response and said, I'm not really looking for format, I'm not going to grade it on organization or on correctness, I just want to see you engaging with the readings I've assigned and giving me some reactions. That would be writing to learn. By contrast, the WID movement, which is really focused on learning how to write, assumes that students need instruction on how to write in their major in a particular context, and that this writing practice reflects critical thinking in that academic community. So, for instance, for this mini, the final project is going to ask you to create a literature review. And I'm going to very much grade you on the quality of your writing, your ability to present this, your ability to make an argument, such as we might see in writing studies. And so that would be a learning to write assignment, as opposed to an informal reflection, which would be a writing to learn type assignment. So this is a very brief overview of some of the history of WAC and WID and definitions of some of these key terms. For Monday, and if you can post it sometime Sunday night, that would be very helpful. I'd like you to find some assignment prompts and think about whether or not you would categorize them as writing to learn or learning to write type assignments, or some of both, which many assignments are. And so we'll start off class on Monday with any questions you have about these two movements and the types of writing that are really associated with them.